Xing Zhongwan was standing at the gate of Qi Villa in the suburbs with his little luggage. After digging in my pocket for a long time, I remembered that I had thrown the cigarette away when I came. Xing Zhongwan sniffed and rang the doorbell. The doorbell rang 3 times, and an old woman came out and opened the door. A pair of cloudy eyes looked Xing Zhongwan up and down at night. This look made Xing Zhongwan feel uncomfortable from the bottom of his heart, and said impatiently, "Can I go in?" The old lady gave in her body, "Is it Miss Xing?" The low hoarse voice sounded like a dry tree branch being smashed to the ground in winter. "Yes." The old lady took Xing Zhongwan to the building. "Mrs. Voice sounds a little different." Xing Zhongwan coughed a few times. "My throat has been injured, and there is something wrong with my throat." The old lady's turbid eyes glanced back at him, and a smile suddenly appeared on her lips. Xing Zhongwan looked at the surrounding environment indifferently. "Where do I live?" The old lady took him to the room at the end of the corridor. "This is your room, take a rest, and I will take you to see the third master later." Xing Zhongwan put the luggage on the bed, turned around and said thank you to her. The old lady nodded to him, turned around and walked downstairs slowly. Xing Zhongwan closed the door and looked around the room. The room is large, with white curtains, a desk and a wardrobe, next to the toilet, and it is a guest room at first glance. Xing Zhongwan sighed and lay on the big bed, staring at the yellowed ceiling above in a daze. A month ago, Xing Zhongwan was called back to his home. I don't have a good impression of Xing Zhongwan's family. As an illegitimate child who has never been looked at directly by his father, it would definitely not be a good thing to be called back suddenly. Sure enough, for more than 20 years, his father asked him to go to Qi House to take care of a paralyzed man. If Xing Zhongwan would usually leave without turning his head, Xing Zhengping said that as long as he was willing to go to the Xing family, he promised to move his mother's ashes back to the Xing family ancestral tomb. Xing Zhongwan laughed in anger. "What kind of big man made you waste so much effort that even my illegitimate child would be stuffed into it?" Xing Zhengping didn't even want to look at his son, who was smiling wildly, but was extremely cold in his heart. If your sister hadn't run away, where would it be your turn to take care of Qi Yun? Xing Zhongwan squinted his eyes. It turned out to be Qi Yun. No wonder Xing Zhengping put on the pole with all his strength. "What do you mean by the old man to let me pretend to be Xing Zongjia? But do you see how I look like a woman?" Xing Zhengping said impatiently, "I don't care what method you use. If you get things done, your mother will be able to enter the ancestral grave of the Xing family." Xing Zhongwan was smoking a cigarette, his long and narrow eyes with a sneer. "Don't break your promise, old man." That day, Xing Zhongwen went to her mother's cemetery and took a bottle of wine to sit in front of her old man's tomb and drink it all night. When the sky was bright, Xing Zhongwan got up and looked at the serious woman on the tombstone. "For your nonsense wish before your death, your son has to take care of a paralyzed man for Xing Zongjia's white lotus flower this time." Xing Zhongwan stared at him after looking at the photo for a long time. I suddenly bowed straight to the tombstone. "Don't worry, I will let you return to Xing's house in a beautiful way." Thinking of this, Xing Zhongwan got up from the bed angrily and went to the bathroom, looking at himself in the mirror. A half-length hair, white shirt, jeans, very neutral dress. The collar firmly blocked the Adam's apple, which was not too obvious. Xing Zhongwan didn't know if he could deceive Qi Yun with this dress. Anyway, looking at the reaction of the old housekeeper just now, he should not be very successful. Anyway, who cares about him? Xing Zhongwan has no interest in knowing what transactions the two have made in private, and he does not believe that the powerful Qi family will not know about Xing Zongjia's escape. Turning on the faucet and washing his face, Xing Zhongwan irritably pinned his half-length hair to the back of his head. Fortunately, he went to the waves for a year before, and his hair has not been taken care of. I didn't expect it to come in handy this time. It's just that I hope Qi Yun sees that he doesn't get angry and aggravates his condition later. Just thinking about it, the door knocked politely 3 times. Xing Zhongwan opened the door, and the old lady glanced at him. Is Miss Sing ready? I'll take you to see the third master. The Chi family's villa is not very large, with a total of 3 floors. Xing Zongwan lives on the second floor and Chi Yun lives on the third floor. Xing Zongwan walked all the way up and found that the windows in the corridor were all drawn with curtains, and the whole space was dark like night, which made people inexplicably uncomfortable. And there seems to be only the old housekeeper in this villa, and he hasn't seen anyone else for so long. The old housekeeper stopped at the room at the end of the corridor and looked back at Xing Zongwan. The third master likes quietness, Miss Xing will not talk much later. Xing Zongwan said in his heart, I don't want to talk yet. The moment the door opened, Xing Zongwan glanced inside and frowned. The inside of the room was darker than the outside, and when the door was opened, there was a smell that had not been ventilated for a long time. Xing Zongwan thought to himself, where is this place for patients? When I followed the old housekeeper in, I saw a big bed with instruments on both sides that I didn't know what to do. There was a person lying on the bed. From the thin bulge, the person on the bed was very thin. The old lady said to the bed, Third master, Miss Xing is here. A word is like throwing into the calm lake and the sound disappears instantly. Xing Zhong took a few steps in the evening and saw the person lying on the bed in the dim light. Rao is Xing Zongwan, with such an uninhibited character, he was shocked when he saw the person on the bed. Is this still the famous third master Qi? The person on the bed was covered with a blanket. Although he couldn't see his body, Xing Zongwan could guess what his body looked like by looking at his face. The whole face is so thin as if only a piece of skin is attached to the bones, and it has long been impossible to see the original appearance. His open eyes were empty and lifeless. If it wasn't for the faint ups and downs of his chest, Xing Zongwan would have thought that what he saw was a dead man. The old housekeeper walked slowly to the side and opened the curtains, and the bright sunlight came in for a moment, and Qi Yun's thin, disfigured face was more clearly displayed in front of Xing Zongwan. Qi Yun's eyes didn't move, even Xing Zongwan couldn't help squinting because of the sudden brightness. Xing Zongwan looked at the abnormality of the person on the bed, and saw the indifference on the face of the old housekeeper not far away, as well as the disgust in his eyes, and suddenly understood that Qi Yun was not only paralyzed, but also blind. Xing Zongwan couldn't help sneering in his heart, this time he didn't have to worry about being seen out of his fake Xing Zongjia. It's really a good calculus. No wonder he will let his illegitimate son approach the third master of Qi, and then think of all kinds of abnormalities since he entered the door. Ha ha! Qi Yun was treated as an abandoned child. What big family would want a paralyzed and blind heir? Xing Zongwan looked at the motionless man lying on the bed, and felt a little emotional in his heart. He met Qi Yun many years ago. He came to the Xing family to break off the marriage, and his sister Bailian almost fainted from tears. At that time, Qi Yun had a cold temperament, and his face was so beautiful that people dared not take a second glance. He left the Xing family without a cup of tea. Xing Zongwan stood on the balcony and looked at the tall and straight back. For the first time, he felt such a proud man. I really want to see him fall from the sky and roll into the mud. Unexpectedly, I really let him see it. Xing Zongwan retracted his thoughts and smiled faintly. His nominal father really played a good abacus. If he didn't, he just grabbed his own weakness. Unfortunately, Xing Zongwan was not stupid. Well, since he's here, take good care of him, as long as Qi Yun doesn't die. As for the rest, don't count on him. Xing Zongwan looked at the man lying on the bed unable to move. Qi Yun, let's get along well in the future. The first dinner at Qi House, Xing Zongwan saw that he was alone in the huge dining room, with 3 dishes and 1 soup in front of him. Xing Zongwan lost his appetite at a glance. Looking around, there was still no one. Xing Zongwan snorted coldly, the quiet ghosts in this house are about to come out. Miss Xing, is the food unpalatable? Suddenly thinking of the old housekeeper's voice behind him, Xing Zongwan was startled. Are you walking silently? The old butler slowly handed an envelope in his hand to him. This is your living expenses this month. If you feel that the food is not to your taste, you can go out to eat or cook it yourself. But you cannot leave the villa while the third master is awake. Xing Zhongwan took the envelope and glanced inside, a thick stack. Xing Zhongwan looked up at the old housekeeper. How do I know when the third master is awake? The old housekeeper twitched the corners of his mouth. Miss Xing will naturally know in the future. Xing Zhongwan shook the envelope in his hand. Thanks. In this room, I remind Miss Xing to talk less. There are professional people who take care of the third master. You just need to stay in this room, and you don't need to worry about the rest. Xing Zhongwan smiled. I'm not a nosy person. The old butler nodded in satisfaction and left the dining room slowly. As soon as the person left, Xing Zhongwan's face sank. I don't mind my own business, but I can't take the blame for you. Looking at Qi San's appearance, I don't know how many days to live, at least he can't die before you don't need me to act. In the evening, Xing Zhongwan finally saw the doctor. He opened Qi Yun's quilt and looked at it. After checking his eyes roughly, Xing Zhongwan couldn't help shaking his head. This is also called an examination. The doctor left in less than 5 minutes. As soon as the doctor left, the old housekeeper came in with a tray. Xing Zhongwan looked over and saw that it was a bowl of white porridge, which should be to feed Qi Yun. The old housekeeper took a bib-like thing around Qi Yun's neck, picked up a bowl and scooped a spoonful of porridge and fed it to him. Qi Yun didn't open his mouth, and the porridge flowed into the bib on one side. After going down so many times, Xing Zhongwan finally understood why Qi Yun was so thin, and he didn't feed anything. When the bowl in the old housekeeper's hand was empty, the old housekeeper collected the bib and threw it into the trash can. He wiped Qi Yun's neck with a towel, saying yes. Xing Zhongwan saw rice grains on the neck that had not much flesh from afar. The old housekeeper left with the bowl and trash can. Xing Zhongwan leaned against the door and said, "Is he not even able to swallow?" The old butler glanced at him and did not answer. After a while, the doctor came and put nutrient solution on Qi Yun, and the shriveled blood vessels were inserted several times but failed to penetrate. Xing Zhongwan was in pain while looking at it, but the person lying on the bed didn't respond at all. Xing Zhongwan frowned and said nothing. After 2 days, the old housekeeper repeated the same thing, and Xing Zhongwan was almost numb watching it. Finally one day he curiously took a bite of the porridge given to Qi Yun. Xing Zhongwan sneered, he couldn't even eat this stuff, let alone the one lying on the bed. There are 3 meals a day, no one is heavy, everyone will drink and vomit, and hang nutrient solution every day. These people have no intention to make Qi San feel better. Xing Zhongwan felt that he should think about the purpose of being sent to Qi Yun. He said that it was to take care of him, but basically he couldn't get involved. Everything was handled by the old housekeeper, so what was he doing here? In the evening, Xing Zhongwan was lying on the bed and playing with his mobile phone, and Yishui's messages were all asking where did he go? Xing Zhongwan put the phone on the bed and didn't return a single one. In order to send my mother back to the Xing family, I came here to endure the humiliation. Before coming, Xing Zhengping signed a non-disclosure agreement with him. Xing Zhongwan got up late, took a black leather ring from the bedside table and tied his hair casually. Qi San should be asleep at night, he is going to go out for a party, otherwise he will be moldy if he guards this house all day. After realizing that the person who appeared in this house, except Qi San, no one cared whether he was a man or a woman, Xing Zhongwan no longer concealed that he was a man. Xing Zhongwan went down to the 2nd floor with the car key and happened to see 2 people dressed as nanny talking. "Did you wash your body today, mister?" "How dare I won't let anyone touch it at all. Besides, it's so dirty, if you want." "I don't want to, I wouldn't want to come if I didn't give a lot of money. But the one lying on the bed is also pitiful. No one has come to see it for more than a year. I heard that he is the eldest young master of the noble family. I don't think we are as good as us. If the crippled and blind person hadn't been hung with a nutrition needle, he would have died long ago. Xing Zongwan shook the key in his hand and sneered, Kyun, Kyun, if you knew that these two servants had arranged it like this, you wouldn't be mad if you changed it to the old one. After leaving the villa and opening the car door, Xing Zongwan looked at his evil eyes in the rear-view mirror. He looked down and hung a string of Buddha beads on his head, which he asked for when his mother was still there. Xing Zongwan lowered his head and cursed, opened the door and got out of the car. Walking to the door of Qi Yun's bedroom on the third floor, Xing Zongwan opened the door, and the smell was still indescribable. The only difference was that the person on the bed was stretching his arms to take the water cup that was placed on the bedside table not far away. The thin arms support the white hospital gown and feel that it will be broken at any time. Xing Zongwan leaned against the door and watched helplessly. It turned out that he couldn't move his entire body. Just thinking about it, a crisp sound, the glass fell to the ground, and the water flowed all over the floor. The arm was stunned in midair, and slowly retracted after a while. Xing Zongwan looked at the watch. 5 minutes passed, no one came up to see what was going on after such a big movement. Xing Zongwan pointed at the watch on his wrist with his finger, and the sapphire inside was glistening with the dim light in the room. The man on the bed returned to calm, like a dead man, only the slight heaving of his chest proved that he still had a breath. Xing Zongwan turned around and went downstairs, and came up to Qi Yun with a water cup in his hand. Xing Zongwan put the water cup on the cabinet on the side and stretched out his hand to help Qi Yun up, but he didn't expect his hand to meet Qi Yun. A thin hand suddenly grabbed Xing Zongwan's wrist, and the cold touch made Xing Zongwan's back feel cold. Nothing else, I poured you a glass of water. Xing Zongwan regretted his troublesome things. He could ignore him completely. Terrible sympathy. A good person did it to the end, just like to prove that he didn't lie to him. His arm suddenly flicked, and an unstable water glass fell to the ground, and also splashed Xing Zongwan all over. Xing Zongwan was annoyed with laughter. Sure enough, he couldn't be a good person. Xing Zongwan got up and looked at the thin face, where there was still a little bit of the style of the past. Xing Zongwan snorted coldly, turned around and went downstairs and poured another glass of water. When he came up, he dragged Qi Yun up from the bed without a word. The man who couldn't move his lower body frantically waved his arms, not knowing how long he had not cut his nails. Inadvertently, traces were left on Xing Zongwan's face. Xing Zongwan opened Qi Yun's mouth and poured water in. Qi Yun coughed violently and his sunken chest heaved violently. Xing Zongwan threw the man back on the bed and looked at him coldly, "Don't implicate me if you want to die." Xing Zongwan looked at himself in the mirror, and there was an obvious bloodstain on his left cheek. I took out a small pillbox from my carry-on luggage and put a little ointment on it. Xing Zongwan's face is the most precious of his own, and daily maintenance is a day's work. God has given such a face, so don't cherish it. Unexpectedly, Qi Yun's strength was quite strong, and Xing Zongwan looked at his face distressfully. The knock on the door sounded at the right time. Xing Zongwan went to open the door, and the old housekeeper looked at him gloomily at the door. Xing Zongwan was still worried about his face, and said absently, "Is something wrong?" The old butler looked at the scar on his face for a while before speaking, "Miss Xing doesn't seem to have listened to me." Xing Zongwan sneered, "Thank you for your reminder, I will pay attention to it in the future." The old housekeeper obviously didn't believe him. "Miss Xing, everything you do here represents the Xing family. Please think clearly before doing anything. What happened to the Xing family?" Xing Zongwan really didn't care. If it wasn't for his mother's obsession with him being happy outside, he would have come to this muddy water. It is best to let his mother enter the ancestral grave. If not, Xing Zongwan is not the master who can be easily manipulated. He is afraid of trouble, but never afraid of trouble. That one is already half dead, what else can I do? Anyway, he is still a living person, not a beast. The one I see is better than Mrs. Key Dog. It's not just a glass of water, you need to be so nervous to mention me. A gleam of light flashed in the eyes of the old housekeeper. I really didn't see it. The old lady is busy, Miss Xing has a good rest. Xing Zhongwan closed the door. Fuck. The phone rang. Xing Zhongwan glanced at it and picked it up. Oh, you are finally willing to answer the phone, where have you been? The lazy female voice on the phone had a hint of charm, and it only felt a headache in Xing Zhongwan's ears. Can you speak normally? The other end of the phone was stunned for a moment. Xing Zhongwan, don't be ashamed of your face, my mother is supporting you with such a big business, where are you going to be cool and happy? My mother works 15 hours a day, and her face grows. Do you know if you have acne? Get out of here, I haven't had for almost a month. Xing Zhongwan habitually went to his pocket to get cigarettes. No. Opened the drawer and took a lollipop from it. You won't be back in a short time, you have to live a life without sex. The gossip on the other end of the phone came. That's not right, if there is a situation, let's call it, otherwise the old lady will quit the job. Xing Zhongwan took a sip of the lollipop, it was so sweet. I'm here as a nanny, but at the moment I guess I've been tricked. Xing Zhongwan talked about the matter for a while, and there was a constant tisk-tisk on the phone. I didn't expect Chi-san to be so miserable. At the beginning, he said that he had a car accident, and his fiancée who was sitting in his co-pilot died on the spot. He only said that it took a lot of effort to save him, but his legs were broken, and he didn't mention his eyes. I'm also blind. Tisk tisk tisk, these people in the political circle are really dirty. I think how much Qi Zongcheng loved Qi-san, the grandson, the heir to the Qi family. I didn't expect that there was a car accident and everything would be gone. If you want me to say that the Qi family is really cruel, even if they are disabled, they are still flesh and blood. Qi-san doesn't even care about him. Xing Zhongwan smashed the lollipop in his mouth in one bite. Don't Qi-sans, if you put this in the past, your little mouth will be smashed. Ha ha ha, oh, you're protecting me, that's right, you're his nominal fiancé now, laughing at me to death, ha 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 ha. The unbridled laughter made Xing Zhongwan couldn't help taking the phone away from his ears. There is a younger brother under Qi Yun, and he is not Madame Qi only hope. She is blind, and her legs are broken. What can I do to fight for the right of inheritance? Qi Zong has so many grandchildren, how can Madame Qi protect her youngest son? As for this, the big one is a piece of shit. The other end of the phone sighed for a while. Xing Zhongwan, what about you? You were sent to take care of such a waste boy. Your Xing family would not want to take the opportunity to get rid of you, right? Xing Zhongwan threw the stick into the trash can on the side. Think beautiful. Xing Zhongwan hung up the phone and finally persuaded the gossip woman to continue to go back to work. Seeing that it was almost time for dinner, Xing Zhongwan opened the door to go to the dining room to make a show. As soon as he went out, he happened to meet the two servants who were doing the laundry. Xing Zhongwan accidentally glanced at the laundry basket and saw yellow excrement and some blood on the top underwear. Judging from the disgusting eyes of the two servants, you don't need to guess whose clothes are in the frame. Xing Zhongwan went down the stairs, thinking about it and going back to the third floor. When I opened Qi Yun's room, the smell of disinfectant came to my face. There were bibs thrown in the trash can. It seemed that the meal had already been fed, and there was no one in the room. Xing Zhongwan turned around and wanted to leave, but suddenly found that something was wrong with the person on the bed, and his breathing was faster than before. Xing Zhongwan raised his brows, walked over to see that Qi Yun's face was a little red, and tried it on his forehead. Xing Zhongwan frowned and had a fever. Well, how can you get a fever? Xing Zhongwan didn't hesitate, lifted Qi Yun's blanket, and a strange stench filled his forehead with the smell of disinfectant. Xing Zhongwan pulled Qi Yun's pants down, no wonder. Xing Zhongwan couldn't help covering his mouth and nose, these beasts really wished Qi Yun would die sooner. No wonder there is blood on the underwear. Chi Yun's lower body was infected with pus because he didn't take good care of it. He didn't clean up the feces in time, and the pants he just put on were soaked with blood. Xing Zhongwan couldn't help swearing swear words. Looking at the two legs that were as thin as bamboo poles due to improper care, he felt strangely that Chi Yun was a little pitiful. Covering him with the quilt, he glanced at the blushing man whose face was burning. I really don't know how he could endure this pain. Xing Zhongwan thought about it. Before calling the doctor, he had to deal with it first, and stretched out his hand to take off his shirt. The person lying motionless on the bed suddenly opened his eyes. Xing Zhongwan was startled. Those eyes looked straight at him. If it wasn't for sure that Chi Yun was blind, Xing Zhongwan really thought he was pretending. Those eyes have no charm, but they are fierce and scary. Go away. The hoarse and rough voice sounded like an unpleasant ear-piercing gear that had not been refueled for a long time. Xing Zhongwan suddenly laughed. So you can still talk. The person on the bed didn't speak anymore, listening to the footsteps of Xing Zhongwan gradually leaving, and slowly closed his eyes. Chi Yun thought that Xing Zhongwan had left, and closed his eyes weakly. He has been lying in bed for more than a year. When he woke up after escaping from a car accident, he could no longer see his eyes, and his legs were also crippled, so he could only lie on the bed and wait to die. Born in the Qi family, Chi Yun knew very well that his body was useless to the Qi family. Grandpa, who had always had high hopes for him, only glanced at him after he was sober, and never appeared again after that. His mother, Mrs. Qi, came to him and cried a few times, but only a few times. Chi Yun was blind but not deaf, so he could hear the private discussions of the servants clearly. His younger brother from abroad was picked up, and his mother completely gave up her own younger brother to support her. At that time, Chi Yun was very calm. His mother was such a person. Being good to him, caring about him was never because she was his own son, she only cared about how much benefit this person could bring to her and consolidate her position in the Qi family, and the crippled self had been completely lost in her heart. Amount of. When I was paralyzed on the bed, I was not without irritability at the beginning. My eyes were pitch black, my legs were numb, and the servants were respectful at first. This third Master Qi is no longer the third Master Qi before. The original respect slowly turned into neglect, and now it has been completely ignored. Qi Yun went from being irritable at first to now being indifferent. From the moment he moved to this remote villa, Qi Yun was cut off from all contact with the outside world. Even if he was a little unwilling, the doctor's diagnosis made him disheartened, and his legs and eyes were not getting better. The condition of his body made him disheartened and lived like a dead man. The people in this villa did not treat him as a living person. It's not that he didn't smell the rotten flesh on his body, and sometimes he also disgusted himself, feeling that he was about to rot on the bed. This useless body should have been taken away by God early in the car accident. The sound of footsteps that had already gone far sounded again. Qi Yun opened his eyes abruptly, and came back again. Xing Zhongwan came back with warm water with a wash basin, and turned up the temperature of the air conditioner in the room. Xing Zhongwan rolled up his sleeves and started to take off Qiyun's clothes. Qi Yun's voice was cold. What are you doing? Xing Zhongwan sneered. What do I want to do? Did you manage it? Did you refuse it? If you have the ability, you can knock my water over again, but can you see it? You. Qi Yun was a little annoyed. He didn't want his body to be seen by others, but as he said, does he still have the right to refuse? Xing Zhongwan twisted the towel and began to carefully wipe Qi Yun's body. Qi Yun was obviously stunned, and the upper body that was still moving was shaking slightly. Xing Zhongwan rubbed the pus and blood on the skin, took a breath. Can you feel the pain? Looking at Qi Yun's expressionless face, he probably couldn't feel it. Xing Zhongwan stopped looking at him and continued to wipe. Qi Yun's heart was already in a mess. It had been a long time since no one had wiped his body. Even his mother left after seeing his bowels and urination. There was disgust in her words. He didn't like other people touching his body, and it wasn't that he couldn't hear those servants talking behind their backs. Chi Yun closed his eyes, and the person who was wiping his body now spoke in a bad tone, but not malicious. Xing Zongwan changed 3 basins of water before cleaning Chi Yun, and took clean clothes from the cabinet for him to put on. Although Chi Yun was so thin that only his skeleton was left, he was still a tall man. Xing Zongwan was sweating when he changed his clothes. Xing Zongwan went downstairs to the old housekeeper and asked him to call a doctor. The old butler glanced at him, a sneer flashed across his mouth, but he still called the doctor. The doctor came and gave Chi Yun an anti-fever injection. Xing Zongwan lifted Chi Yun's quilt. What about these wounds, won't you deal with them? The doctor pushed the glasses on the bridge of his nose. It's not stated in the contract that this is also my responsibility. Xing Zongwan sneered, you don't care, he won't go away unless his wound is treated and the fever will go away. I don't think your contract says you want to watch him die. The doctor was stunned, and after thinking about it, he prescribed the medicine and asked the nurse behind him to get the medicine. Just as he was about to leave, Xing Zongwan grabbed the collar of his shirt. Tell me how to use it, and you can leave. Xing Zongwan took the ointment and smeared the large and small festering wounds on Chi Yun's body with a cotton swab. At first I thought it was just the lower body, but when I changed clothes, I found out that the entire back was also covered. Bedridden for a long time, the airtight and damp skin is festering. Xing Zongwan thought that you can't understand the pain if you don't feel the pain in your lower body, but your upper body is so rotten, you can really bear it. It took more than half an hour to smear the large and small wounds on Chi Yun's body. Xing Zongwan felt a little hungry. Looking at the hanging bottle with water, he decided to go down to eat first. As soon as he left the door, the old butler stopped him. Miss Xing, it seems that you really decided to fight against me. I said when you first came here, you should talk less here, and don't do things you shouldn't do. Xing Zongwan leaned against the door and looked at her slantingly. He hated being threatened the most since he was a child. What should I do to care about your business? Old lady, since I'm here, I can't watch him die. Even if Mrs. Chi came to ask in person, I said the same thing. Xing Zongwan crossed her and went downstairs, and he didn't say the second half of the sentence. Chi Yun's death was of no benefit to him. His cheap dad wanted to take the opportunity to drag him into the water. If Chi Yun dies, he will take the blame. He can't let Xing Zhengping get his wish. Besides, Xing Zongwan said in front of his mother's tomb that it will make his mother beautiful. When he went back, although he didn't think it was a great thing to enter the Xing family, he couldn't let go of his mother until he died. Xing Zongwan must make it happen with such a good opportunity. Angrily kicked up the handrail of the stairs, Xing Zongwan entered the kitchen and glanced at the prepared bland dinner, which was already cold enough to make people look unappetizing. Xing Zongwan entered the kitchen, opened the refrigerator and looked up and down, and simply made himself a bowl of noodles. After eating quickly, I turned my head and thought, washed some rice and put it on the stove to prepare some porridge. Xing Zongwan took the porridge into Chi Yun's room, and the anti-inflammatory drugs were almost finished. Xing Zongwan skillfully pulled out the needle and pressed cotton to stop the bleeding. Xing Zongwan stretched out his hand to help Chi Yun up. As soon as his hands touched Chi Yun's shoulder, the person on the bed opened his eyes alertly. What are you doing? Xing Zongwan said casually, Eat, what are you doing? Don't tell me that you have eaten what the old woman fed. Chi Yun did not speak, but did not cooperate. Xing Zongwan was sweating profusely and was in a bad mood. He simply ignored him and took a mouthful of porridge and put it to his mouth. Eat it. With a wave of Chi Yun's hand, the porridge fell onto Xing Zongwan's white shirt together with the spoon. Xing Zongwan was so annoyed that the injury on Lao Tzu's face has not yet been settled with you. Why are you so shameless? I kindly cooked it for you, what's your attitude? Chi Yun turned his head, I didn't let you control me. Xing Zhong stood up angrily, you thought I was willing to take care of you. If it wasn't for Lao Tzu being trapped in this game, I'd you. Angrily paced back and forth in the room, Qi Yun's sunken cheeks were lifeless in the dim light, looking like a cardboard man. Xing Zongwan thought to himself, why should I be angry with a disabled person? Walking in front of Qi Yun, Xing Zongwan bent down and leaned against his ear, God let you live, it's not for you to be so bad. The person on the bed was stunned. Qi Yun didn't expect to hear such words from a stranger. He has been lying in bed for more than a year, and he has heard a lot of disgust and disappointment, and few people really care about his body. Hearing this sentence from a stranger today, Qi Yun felt a little strange. Who are you to me, and what right do you have to control me? Qi Yun snorted coldly, turning his face away, obviously not wanting to care about Xing Zongwan. Xing Zongwan is not a person without temper. He talked to him patiently, but when the result was good, people didn't appreciate it at all. Xing Zongwan put the bowl in his hand heavily on the bedside table, turned and left. As soon as Xing Zongwan left, the room instantly became quiet. Qi Yun opened his eyes. It was still pitch black, but the tip of his nose smelled a faint smell of vegetables. Qi Yun turned his head along the scent, his unfocused eyes staring in the direction of the bedside table, his hand hanging beside him tightly grasping the clean sheets. Xing Zongwan felt very depressed and wanted to smoke. After groping for a long time in my coat pocket, I only found one lollipop. Xing Zongwan sat on the steps outside the villa with a lollipop in his mouth. It was so sweet, it tasted like strawberries. Xing Zongwan took a deep breath, and even his breath smelled like strawberries. Xing Zongwan rubbed his hair, blowing the cold wind, and couldn't help but sneezed. Xing Zongwan never ate candy when he was a child, and his health has been bad since his mother gave birth to him. Later, their mother and son were kicked out of the country by Xing Zhengping, and their health was even worse. Xing Zongwan knew how to pull his mother's needles when he was 10 years old, and he could still help with injections when he was older, so he was so skilled in pulling needles for Qi Yun just now. There is very little time for his mother to take care of Xing Zongwan in bed for many years. Xing Zongwan is also very sensible. Who didn't like candy when she was a child, but her mother couldn't eat candy, and there was nothing sweet at home. He has never eaten cake. When he was a child, Xing Zongwan was counting how long his mother could live every day. How could he be in the mood to celebrate his birthday? It's not that they haven't been scolded as a wild species, an illegitimate child. The strange thing is that Xing Zongwan is very calm. He doesn't feel that his identity is lower than others. It is enough that he has the best mother in the world. Although his mother never said that he loves him, Xing Zhong knowing that his mother loves him looking at his eyes full of pity can't deceive anyone. His mother believed in Buddhism. When he was a child, Xing Zongwan liked to lean on his mother's side and listen to her teaching Buddhist scriptures. Before his mother died, he begged for a string of beads to keep him safe, which Xing Zongwan wore all the time. His mother often said to him, "Let him not hate it, everything is cause and effect, everyone should look at the good side and live a little easier. The encounter between people is an opportunity, everything follows fate, and everything follows one's own heart." Xing Zongwan was biting a lollipop. His mother told him very open-minded, but he still couldn't let go of that obsession. After his mother left, Xing Zongwan's emotions and desires seemed to be taken away. He ate sugar and cakes that he had never eaten before, and the sweetness turned off his appetite. For those who don't care, all the good things in the world have lost their original luster. Xing Zongwan bit the sweet strawberry lollipop and swallowed it. The anger in his heart dissipated long ago. Qi Yun was someone who had nothing to do with him, so there was really no need to be angry with him. His behavior just now was a little funny. Xing Zongwan stood up, stretched, turned up the steps, and suddenly remembered something before taking a few steps. 3 years ago, he went back to the country for personal affairs and met Qi Yun at a banquet. At that time, Qi Yun was in the limelight. Although he looked like he didn't eat human fireworks, there were still many people who were not afraid of death. At that time, Chi Yun had broken the engagement with the Xing family and had a new fiancé. Xing Zhongwan had seen the woman, and she was much worse than his sister Balian Hua, but who gave her a father with a strong background. Xing Zhongwan sneered in his heart, Qiyun, Qiyun, what's the use of your high status, you can't even choose the person you like, it should be said that someone like you can really like who? At that moment, Xing Zhongwan felt that Qi Yun's aloof appearance was not so annoying anymore. Xing Zhongwan originally planned to leave due to human affection, but he did not expect to be dragged for 2 full hours. Xing Zhongwan was so depressed that he went to the garden outside to breathe. The garden of the hotel is full of nocturnal incense. Before Xing Zhongwan could take a deep breath, he saw a picture that made him hold his breath deeply. The slender body in a black suit bent over and looked at Ye Laxiang in front of her. The little white flowers set off the side face that was astonishing. Xing Zhongwan felt that the man not far away was about to float away. The scent of Ye Laxiang was poisonous, and Xing Zhongwan felt that he was about to be poisoned. The corners of the man's mouth curved up slightly, and the long eyelashes cast a shadow under his eyes. When Xing Zhongwan reacted, he almost suffocated himself. No wonder so many people sharpen their heads and want to send their daughters to Qi house and marry Qi Yun, and their sister cried so much after breaking off the marriage. Now it seems to be somewhat sincere. Qi Yun's appearance is really attractive, and he really wants to dirty him with that inhuman look. Xing Zhongwan was amused by his own thoughts, and the person who turned around was no longer there. It's like a fairy who secretly descends to earth, leaving behind a wisp of fragrance and disappearing. Xing Zhongwan pulled away from his memory, sighed, looked up at Qi Yun's room on the 3rd floor, scolded a swear word, and entered the room. He went to the kitchen to make a new bowl of porridge and entered Qi Yun's room. Putting the bowl of cold porridge aside, Xing Zhongwan glanced at Qi Yun with his eyes closed. I know you are still awake, come and drink the porridge. I made it myself, it's not as bad as theirs. The person on the bed was still motionless. Xing Zhongwan breathed a sigh of relief. I am really fascinated by your beauty, it still expired back then. Xing Zhongwan stretched out his hand to support the man. Qi Yun opened his eyes, and the face was so thin that Xing Zhongwan felt that he could pierce the skin on his face with a little effort. Of course, his body wasn't much better, and his bones were hurting. Are you sitting up? This time Qi Yun didn't resist, but he didn't cooperate either. Xing Zhongwan took 2 pillows and put them on his waist, and Qi Yun's weak body slid down the pillows. Xing Zhongwan frowned, took 2 more pillows from the cabinet, helped Qi Yun up, and fixed his weak lower body with pillows. After doing this, Xing Zhongwan was already sweating all over. Qi Yun opened his eyes, and those eyes looked a little scary on the skin on the face. Xing Zhongwan touched the sweat on his face and sat by the bed with a bowl in his hand. He scooped a mouthful of porridge and put it to Qi Yun's mouth, but Qi Yun remained unmoved. Xing Zhongwan snorted, it's all like this, why are you pretending to be arrogant? If you want to die, I'll help you. After speaking, he threw a fruit knife on Qi Yun's body, take this knife and stab you in the throat and you will be free. Xing Zhongwan picked up the knife and put it in Qi Yun's hand, if you don't want to die, just drink the porridge, it's much harder to live than to die, Qi Yun, you'll be willing to rot in this broken place and bury it in obscurity. In the field, let the name Qiyun disappear in people's memory? If you want to do this, then I won't stop you. Xing Zhongwan chuckled, I just looked down on you. Qi Yun was surprised. His heart, which had been dry with despair, rippled a little with surprise. He thought that Xing Zhongwan would not come back again, he had already rejected this man twice, he thought. He is a useless now, people used to approach him because of his appearance and power, but now he is in a state of embarrassment and his body even I feel disgusted, why is this person being nice to me over and over again? There was nothing in him to seek for. He actually said that he looked down on me. If someone dared to talk to him like this before, I'm afraid they would not even find their bones. Before, Chi-san was not a good person, but now Chi-san has become a waste. Strangely, Chi-yun's heart was not as panicked as before, perhaps because he thought all this was too absurd. He didn't understand why this person did this to him. In fact, Chi-yun thought too much. Xing Zhongwan's idea was very simple. Since he was going to stay with Chi-yun for a while, why not make him more attractive? How good-looking he used to be, who doesn't like beautiful things, is better than facing a skeleton all day long. And watching a person who is so embarrassed get better a little bit in his hands, there is a sense of accomplishment, so life here will not be so boring. Neither of them could guess each other's thoughts. The hand that Xing Zhongwan had been holding was sore. When he decided to give up and take it back, Chi-yun opened his mouth and swallowed the spoonful of porridge. Xing Zhongwan smiled, "Is that right? Don't make trouble with your body, right?" Then he took another sip, and Chi-yun swallowed it silently. It is undeniable that the porridge in this person's hand is much stronger than what he had eaten before. After feeding a few mouthfuls, Xing Zhongwan stopped. "Can you hold the bowl by yourself? Can you eat it by yourself?" Chi-yun was stunned for a moment, and after a while, he put something cool in his hand, a bowl. Chi-yun felt a little unreal. He hadn't touched the bowl for a long time. He tried to pick it up, but his fingers didn't obey. Chi-yun felt a wave of disgust in his heart. The feeling of powerlessness in his heart was like his weak waist. Chi-yun was very angry. Why did he take the bowl, and he threw it in front of a stranger who couldn't even hold the bowl? All face. Thinking of this, Chi-yun's heart trembled. His face? Does he still have such a thing? There is no imaginary complaining and ridicule. There was a sound of footsteps in my ears, the quilt on my body was lifted, and a clean bed was replaced. After being busy for a while, Xing Zhongwan filled a bowl of porridge from the rice cooker that was kept warm in the kitchen downstairs and came back to Chi-yun. "It's been a long time since I didn't eat, so it's normal to have no energy. You don't have to waste your upper body. I'll feed you when it's time, and when you have the strength, take a bowl and eat it yourself." Chi-yun smelled the faintly fragrant porridge delivered to her mouth, and her doubts deepened. "What exactly do you want from me?" It was almost dawn when Xing Zhongwan returned to his room. He checked the time and dialed a video call. The phone was quickly connected, and a beautiful woman's face appeared in the video. This face was beautiful, but the words she said didn't match her face at all. "Lao Xing, you finally took the initiative to contact me. When will you come back? My mother is dying of exhaustion. I am working for 3 people alone. I am not a cow. I can't bear this hardship. Come back quickly, there is no I'm almost crying to death." Xing Zhongwan poked out his ears. "Speak normally." The person in the video immediately sat up straight, and the voice that was spoken by the face that was clearly a woman was a thick man's voice. "I said that you are addicted to pretending to be Xing Zhongjia in China, and you won't come back. I tell you, if you continue to oppress me like this and make me overworked, I will resign." Xing Zhongwan lay lazily on the bed. "My mother's grave hasn't been moved in yet. I can't get out until my mother's affairs are settled. I said you can't wear men's clothes seriously, you transvestite." Cheng Zhenj sneered, "You don't care, I like to wear what I like." "Hey, I said you won't be able to get off at the end, right? Serving that paralyzed man Chi-san makes you so happy." Xing Zhongwan touched his face. "What? You look quite happy." Xing Zhongwan gave him a roll of eyes. "Just treat me as doing good deeds and accumulating merit." Cheng Zhenj squinted at him. "It's my fault that I believe you." Xing Zhongwan snorted. "The reality is already so uncomfortable. I have to choose a way of living that makes me happy. You have to work hard during this time. Wait for me to go back and treat you well. What kind of beauty you want is only what you said. Xing Zhongwan couldn't invite me without me." Cheng Zhenj hooked his fingers with bright red nail polish and said happily, "It's a deal." Xing Zhongwan hung up the phone, and at 5 in the morning, decided to lie down and take a nap. Xing Zhongwan had a dream. In the dream, he and his mother stood at the door of Xing's old house. His mother begged Xing Zhengping to let them go in and see his grandfather for the last time. Xing Zhengping stood on the steps and looked at them coldly, and said, "A dream." His mother hugged him and cried so hard. Xing Zhongwan was young at that time and didn't understand what happened. He was just swept away by his mother's raging tears, frightened. In a trance, someone stretched out his hand to help his mother. Xing Zhongwan looked up, the sun pierced his eyes, and in the blur it was a very kind old grandmother. A young man followed him. Little Xing Zhongwan looked over, and the boy's face was blurred. Just when he tried to see clearly, the boy's face suddenly turned into Qi Yun's, and then the boy's face suddenly withered and turned into a only thin-skinned skeleton faces. Xing Zhongwan suddenly opened his eyes, his back was wet, covering his forehead. How could he have such a dream? Just as he was about to get up, there was a loud noise outside the door, and the servants cursed from childhood to adulthood. Xing Zhongwan frowned and put on his clothes, opened the door, and saw that the two servants were still complaining loudly. "Just when I am precious and precious, I don't even touch him. If it weren't for the face of money, who would touch him? The bed is full of excrement and urine, and no one will clean it up, am I willing? A residual waste is still so bad. If I quit, whoever wants to serve, who will serve?" The wash basin in their hands fell heavily on the ground. The two servants glanced at Xing Zhongwan before leaving. Although they didn't understand why the old housekeeper wanted to call him Miss Xing when he was clearly a man, it should be unusual for him to be dressed up. "Man, don't know why you want to live with a cripple. Miss Xing, hurry up too, this place is really not for people to stay." Xing Zhongwan glanced at them coldly. The two servants glanced at each other, lowered their heads and went out without speaking. Xing Zhongwan looked up and looked at the direction of the third floor. What's going on upstairs? He was in a bad mood when he got up. He went up to the third floor, and before he got in, Xing Zhongwan smelled an unspeakable smell. Qi Yun's quilt was thrown on the ground, and half of his trousers were taken off. The man lying on the bed like a piece of paper had his chest heaving violently. His two slender legs were pale and pitiful. Awful! Xing Zhongwan covered his forehead. This person is really disabled and does not change his temper, so he can feel comfortable. People are driven away, who will clean up? The voice of the old housekeeper came from behind. "Miss Xing, don't worry, a new servant has been sent over." Xing Zhongwan asked, "How long will it take for someone to come?" The old butler was silent. Xing Zhong smiled angrily, "If there is no new servant, let him lie down like this, lying in a pile of feces and urine." The old housekeeper smiled, "I have fulfilled my duties. If Miss Xing can't see it, she can do it herself." After finishing speaking, the old housekeeper looked at Xing Zhongwan jokingly, and Xing Zhongwan rubbed his aching head. The bad smell in his nose made him want to burst, but when he turned around and saw the slightly trembling body on the bed, Qi Yun must have heard the words of the servant and the old housekeeper just now. The frightening side face suddenly flashed in his mind. Xing Zhongwan gritted his back molars. What a hell! Xing Zhongwan took off his coat, went to the bathroom to get a clean towel and a wash basin with warm water, and walked to Qi Yun's bed under the surprised eyes of the old housekeeper. Xing Zhongwan was in a bad mood and didn't want to be polite to her. "If you don't want to help, please go out and bring it with you." Xing Zhongwan's tone was very bad. The old housekeeper's face turned pale, and after watching him for a while, he finally closed the door and went out. Xing Zhongwan took a deep breath and turned to take off his pants for Qi Yun. Unexpectedly, before Xing Zhongwan started, Qi Yun's thin hands were already tightly grasping the waist of his trousers. Xing Zhongwan laughed, "What are you doing? If you don't know, I thought you were a big girl. Besides, I've seen it before, so I'm embarrassed. I don't dislike you, you hate me too." Grabbing Qi Yun's hand, it was frighteningly cold. Qi Yun's body trembled slightly, his face turned pale. Xing Zhongwan couldn't see this look of humiliation and burden, and what he didn't know thought he wanted to do him. Kyun, you have to face the reality, the servant was driven away by you, do you want to lie down like this? It's normal for you to be unable to take care of yourself in the current situation, you don't let others touch it, well you have yours. I can understand self-esteem, but let me tell the truth, what's the use of your self-esteem now, you don't let me touch it, okay, then watch your wound reinfect? People have to learn to bow their heads at the right time, your excess self-esteem now it won't bring you any benefit, and it's just a pointless struggle and a joke in the eyes of others. Xing Zhongwan threw the towel in his hand into the wash basin, what to do, you can do it yourself. Xing Zhongwan was dying of anger, and the unspeakable smell in the claustrophobic space became stronger and stronger. Time passed by, Xing Zhongwan snorted coldly, got up and wanted to leave, he was not a good person at all, and doing this was the limit. As soon as the is slapped back, he thinks of another way to things. He didn't want to eat this idleness. Xing Zhongwan figured it out, and was about to turn around when he suddenly saw Qi Yun move his hand away tremblingly. Xing Zhongwan was stunned, and he couldn't leave. Xing Zhongwan untied Qi Yun's trousers, changed the dirty trousers, wringed out the towel and wiped his lower body clean. During this period, Xing Zhongwan looked up at Qi Yun, closed his eyes tightly, and bit his lips so tightly that he could see blood. At this time, Xing Zhongwan didn't have the anger at the beginning. He also understood Qi Yuntian's arrogance and how noble his status was. He was held by others from childhood to adulthood. Now such a body can only bring him humiliation. Xing Zhongwan, don't overdo it, everyone has their own lives, and he really can't control the rest. After cleaning Qi Yun thoroughly, Xing Zhongwan gave him medicine and opened the window for ventilation. Also sprayed a little air cleaner. The whole room was refreshed for a while. Xing Zhongwan looked at Qi Yun, and the man regained his indifference, staring straight at the ceiling. I'll go downstairs to get something to eat, and I'll bring it to you later. You'll have a rest. After Xing Zhongwan finished speaking, he walked out of the bedroom. The moment the door closed, Qi Yun's eyes blinked, and the circles of his eyes were a little red. When Qi Yun was injured, his body hadn't shrunk so much. Although there are wounds left after surgery on the body, the young man's body is still amazingly beautiful. At the beginning, the young nurses were very attentive to take care of him. At that time, Qi Yun had not yet resisted being touched by others as much as he is now. Later, he was gradually replaced by new nurses, and Qi Yun was disgusted by the intentional or unintentional touching of his body by these people when he was being washed. The nurses changed from batch to batch. Later, the Qi family ignored him more and more, and the quality of the nurses invited became worse and worse. It wasn't that Qi Yun couldn't hear the teasing about his body in private, but the malice and disgust in his tone made Qi Yun feel sick. He started to resist being touched by others, and the carer's attitude towards him was getting worse and worse, as happens all the time today. It is not uncommon for him to lie on a dirty bed sheet and be ignored for a day. Most of the time, the housekeeper comes in to feed the meal and can't stand the smell, forcing the nurse to come in to clean up. Qi Yun was like a piece of pork that was stale for a long time being turned over and over. His lower body was not at all conscious, Qi Yun could feel the rude movement, and the wiping action was like scraping a dead fish. Qi Yun was proud, and Xing Zhongwan said he had to face the reality. He had faced reality long ago, from the moment the doctor sentenced him to death for his legs and eyes. But the pride from childhood to adulthood made him want to retain a little dignity. Xing Zhongwan's words just now broke his last bit of dignity. Xing Zhongwan changed his clothes and scrubbed him with gentle movements. He heard people around him gasp slightly, and it took a lot of effort to talk to someone who couldn't move his lower body. He often heard complaints from nurses. But Xing Zhongwan didn't, and cleaned himself up silently. Qi Yun lay on the bed and felt the dirty air in the room disappear little by little, and the air freshener smelled of sea salt filled the room. For the first time, Qi Yun felt respected. Qi Yun's eyes were fixed on the ceiling, and he suddenly became a little curious about the person beside him. Xing Zhongwan boiled soup in the kitchen, and slept for a few hours in the morning. His head was dizzy, and after another physical labor, Xing Zhongwan knew without thinking that he must be haggard. That extremely precious face must have dark circles under the eyes. Xing Zhongwan felt that he had nothing to do and was looking for trouble. The aroma of beef wafted out. Xing Zhongwan took a sip, the taste was not bad, and turned off the fire. When the old housekeeper was standing behind him, Xing Zhongwan was taken aback. "Are you used to standing behind others to be scary?" The old butler said with a sullen face, "I didn't expect that Miss Xing was really interested in the third master." Xing Zhongwan is also direct, everyone understands, and there is no need to turn around to talk. I don't care if I watch him die. I have to protect myself. The Xing family sent me here to make me a cannon fodder. I'm not stupid. You are here, old lady. I don't know if you took it. Our goal is the same for whoever has the benefit to do things for whoever. We just can't watch Chi-san die. Since the goal is the same, let's play the trick without interfering with each other. You are still the old housekeeper, and I am still Miss Xing." The old housekeeper's withered face was expressionless, and there was still some vigilance in his eyes. Xing Zhongwan filled a bowl of soup and shook it in front of her. "Don't worry, it's not poisonous." With a cold snort, he turned and left the room. The old housekeeper's face was ashen, looking at Xing Zhongwan's back thoughtfully. Xing Zhongwan went upstairs with a bowl. He went to Qi Yun's bed and pulled a chair. "I had beef soup today. I tried it, and it tasted okay." Xing Zhongwan bent over to help Qi Yun up, and fixed his body with a pillow. This time Qi Yun didn't resist. Xing Zhongwan breathed a sigh of relief. "If this was going to be a lot of trouble, I would really give up." He scooped a spoonful of soup and put it beside Qi Yun's mouth. Qi Yun opened his mouth and ate it. Xing Zhongwan felt that he could take a quick nap today. But Qi Yun refused to eat after 2 bites. "Xing Zhongwan, is it hard to eat?" "No, it tastes all right." "It's hard to eat." Xing Zhongwan couldn't help but ask. After a long time, Qi Yun turned his head slightly. Xing Zhongwan wondered, "Then why don't you eat it?" Xing Zhongwan was stunned, and a strange idea suddenly flashed into his mind. "Are you afraid that eating too much will make it inconvenient to go to the toilet?" Qi Yun's face turned to the side again, and his upper body trembled visibly. In Xing Zhongwan's eyes, Qi Yun looked inexplicably fragile. Xing Zhongwan held his forehead. He really owed the Qi family, no, he owed Qi Yun. "I scooped a spoonful of the soup again, it's okay, I'll help you." Xing Zhongwan is also a strange person. Although he was born in the rich and wealthy circle, he does not like people in this circle very much. When he and his mother were kicked out by Xing Zhenping's design, his grandfather had already passed away. Of the few handkerchiefs that she made with her mother on weekdays, no one came out to say a word for her. His mother didn't want to leave the Xing family, although Xing Zhongwan still didn't understand why his mother was so persistent. Before being driven out of the country, his mother fell ill. I don't know what method Xing Zhenping used. No major hospital was willing to accept his mother, and he was desperate. The young Xing Zhongwan hugged his mother and knelt at the door of the hospital, at a loss. At that time, he was too young to ask for help and he really couldn't think of any other way. He thought that maybe he and his mother would die in front of the hospital, not necessarily. But God gave them a way out, and the kind-faced grandma who appeared at his grandfather's funeral helped him and his mother. Qi Yun felt that he must have heard it wrong, and turned his head in a daze. Xing Zhongwan sat up straight, enduring the pain all over his body. "You answer me first, are you unable to control urination and defecation?" Qi Yun's face was sullen and he didn't speak. Xing Zhongwan had expected this situation long ago, so he was not in a hurry and said slowly. "If you can control it, it will be easy. I will move into your room today, and call me if you need it. If not, then I will have to put on adult diapers for you. If you pull once, I will have to do this. Once, that really kills me. Xing Zongwan observed Qi Yun's expression while talking, and found that his ears were a little red. You'd better tell the truth, your skin is so festering right now that it's really unfit to wear that stuff. Xing Zongwan looked at Qi Yun quietly, he was not in a hurry, this kind of thing can't be rushed. After a long time, Qi Yun said, no need to wear it. The voice was hoarse and harsh, Xing Zongwan couldn't help rubbing his ears. That's fine, you can eat it at ease, just call me if you need it. I looked at it on Thursday and there really is a urinal. After yawning, Xing Zongwan picked up the bowl and started feeding again, but Qi Yun kept his mouth shut. Xing Zongwan said impatiently, you are still a child. Please, I have been tossed by you and haven't slept all night. Now I am so sleepy, you can finish eating and let me go to sleep. Qi Yun's eyes drooped down, the long eyelashes fell on the pale skin, and the fragile wind could float away. Why does it seem like I bullied you? Xing Zongwan wanted to cry without tears. I was the one who should cry and be depressed. Qi Yun opened his mouth and ate the beef soup into his mouth. The sweet taste of beef spread in his mouth, his stomach felt comfortable, and even his heart was not so empty. After eating the porridge, Xing Zongwan didn't have the strength to clean up, so he casually put the bowl against the chair and prepared to squint for a while. Seeing that the people around him had been silent for a long time, Qi Yun turned his head in doubt, and after a while, the sound of long breathing came. Did he fall asleep? Qi Yun turned his head, his eyes were pitch black, and his weak waist was pinched by the pillow and sat reluctantly. It had been a long time since he had sat for such a long time. Has the person next to you not eaten yet? Qi Yun was taken aback by this thought and couldn't help coughing. Xing Zongwan said in a daze, remember to call me if you want to go to the toilet. After speaking, he fell asleep again. Qi Yun's ears were a little hot, he moved his upper body helplessly, and finally looked in the direction of his breathing. Xing Zongwan had another dream. The kind old lady in the dream arranged for his mother to be admitted to the hospital. Little Xing Zongwan was still worried about whether she would implicate her and cause her trouble. The old lady touched his little head, what a sensible child, you can live in peace, no one will come to trouble you. Come on, Yuner takes her brother to play outside. The young man following the old lady walked to Xing Zongwan's side and held his hand. Xing Zongwan looked up at him, sister, you are so beautiful. The boy frowned and shook his hand. The old lady beside her was a little unhappy, Yuner, you can't be so rude. The old lady smiled and said to Xing Zongwan, he has a bad temper, so he didn't scare you. Xing Zongwan shook her head, she just thought that this elder sister was good-looking and her name was nice, Yuner, not like a little fairy. Ma'am, when I grow up, I want to marry a beautiful wife like my sister. The young man's face was as black as the bottom of a pot, and the old lady was stunned and then laughed. After that day, Xing Zongwan never saw the old lady and the beautiful sister beside him again. After his mother got well and was discharged from the hospital, he decided to go abroad. Before leaving, his mother also told him that if there is a chance in the future, he must repay Mrs. Qi, and then said to herself that such people probably won't need us. Lately, we have received a great favor from others, and my mother has no chance to pay it back, but you must remember who saved our mother and son's lives. This was the only thing he had in mind before his mother died, apart from returning to the Xing family. Xing Zongwan was awakened by the sound of heavy objects falling to the ground, opened his eyes and saw that Qi Yun was thrown to the ground together. Xing Zongwan thought to himself, Madam, you really made a prophecy, your son didn't come here to return the feces and urine to the kindness. Xing Zongwan got up and helped Qi Yun up, what's wrong with you, didn't you tell me to go to the toilet? Qi Yun froze, his face pale. This fall, the pain in his elbow was piercing, and he wanted to get the urinal beside the bed, but accidentally fell down. Xing Zongwan helped the person onto the bed, took the urinal, and unbuttoned Chi Yun's pants. Chi Yun turned his face away in embarrassment. Xing Zongwan was speechless. It's all a big man, what are you embarrassed about? I took out Chi Yun's things and took a look, the color was pretty good. Xing Zongwan didn't take a closer look the first few times. At this time, it was the afternoon with plenty of light, and Xing Zongwan couldn't even look at it without thinking. I couldn't help thinking in my heart that there must have been no women in Chi Yun before, but thinking about it, he was so cold and abstinent that he couldn't imagine what he would look like in bed. After waiting for a long time, Chi Yun didn't see any urine coming out, but his face turned red. Xing Zongwan held the soft ball and couldn't help but ask, "Can't you urinate?" Chi Yun lowered his eyes and the corners of his forehead were slightly sweating. Xing Zongwan saw it, and Chi Yun lowered his eyes whenever he felt uncomfortable. "Would it be better to stand up? I'll help you to the bathroom." Chi Yun gritted his teeth, and his face became more and more red. Xing Zongwan didn't wait for him to answer, and bent over to stand him up. Chi Yun's legs were limply hanging on the ground, which was useless at all. Xing Zongwan dragged him to the bathroom with all his strength, let him lean against himself, unbuttoned Chi Yun's pants, held his cock, put him down. "Easy." Chi Yun closed his eyes turned red. Xing Zongwan struggled a little, "Please hurry up, it's very heavy." After saying that, he let go of the things in his hand and rubbed Chi Yun's lower abdomen. Chi Yun shook his body and sighed. Li Li urinated intermittently, splashing all over Xing Zongwan. Xing Zongwan saw his trousers turn dark, pulled Chi Yun's trousers and dragged him back to the bed, and turned to go back to change his trousers. "Who are you?" The man on the bed suddenly opened his mouth, and Xing Zongwan turned around in surprise. Chi Yun opened his eyes and stared at the ceiling indifferently. "Aren't you Xing Zongjia? Who are you?" Xing Zongwan scratched his hair and went around thousands of turns in his mind in a short time, thinking about making up a name. Late. Xing Zongwan thought about it for a long time. Late. What is it late for? Late night. Chi Yun repeated the name. Xing Zongwan, ah. So your name is Wan Wan. Chi Yun's hoarse voice hit Xing Zongwan's head with a stick. "Hey, no, the old man on the bed, wait a minute. This is a nickname that only his mother can call, how can it be so strange to say it from Chi Yun's mouth?" Xing Zongwan wanted to explain that Chi Yun had closed his eyes and stopped talking. Xing Zongwan felt that something was wrong. "Chi Yun, did you misunderstand something?" Chi Yun knew that the Xing family wanted to send Xing Zongjia to take care of him. He knew Xing Zongjia, his former fiancé. When the old man of the Xing family was still alive in the early years, there is no need to say much about the prominence of the Xing family. Chi Yun's grandfather came to Xing Zongjia in person to win over the Xing family. Chi Yun knew from a young age that his marriage was beyond his control. His only conception of his future wife was the exchange of interests, so when his grandfather asked him to marry Xing Zongjia, Chi Yun didn't have much thought. Just a symbol. He still has some vague images of Xing Zongjia, not that she is not good looking, she is considered excellent in the circle because of her appearance, Chi Yun just doesn't like it for some reason, and there is something familiar in her eyes when she first met her. Stunning and uncomfortable possessiveness. That kind of scrutiny is full of calculations, calculating how much you can get from yourself, and how to maximize your benefits. Chi Yun looked at her coldly. This is a woman with a very utilitarian heart, she likes her appearance but prefers the Chi family behind her. It's just that this marriage contract did not last long. After the death of Mr. Xing, the Xing family quickly declined, and the Xing family gradually lost its original value. When she came to the door to break off the marriage, Xing Zongjia was crying with pear flowers and rain, pulling his sleeves to tell him not to abandon her. Chi Yun looked down at the cuffs that were being pulled, thinking how real or fake these tears were. In Chi Yun's eyes, this woman's somewhat clumsy acting skills are a joke. Sure enough, less than a week after the two broke their engagement, Xing Zongja was photographed marrying a popular little fresh meat. At that time, his grandfather had already found another suitable family for him. So when Qi Yun knew that Xing Zongja was coming, he was full of disgust. It was unbelievable that someone as powerful as Xing Zhengping would send his only daughter to take care of him, unless he made some shady deal with the Qi family. Thinking of Xing Zongja's eyes full of desire for power, he really didn't believe that she would come to take care of this disabled person. It's just that things were a little different from what he thought. Xing Zongja was very quiet when he came, and it seemed that there was no one like her in this house at all. Until that day she poured him a glass of water. Without listening to her voice, Qi Yun knew that this person was definitely not Xing Zongja. The slightly heavy voice was not like an ordinary woman, but the old housekeeper called her Miss Xing. He didn't know that the Xing family had another daughter, but this person was definitely not Xing Zongja, so who was she? Qi Yun regained his senses from his thoughts. There was no one in his room. Xing Zongwan went back to change his clothes and hadn't come back. Qi Yun, who was used to being alone, suddenly felt a little lonely. Frightened by his ridiculous thought, Qi Yun forced himself to draw out his thoughts. Why did the Xing family send this woman here? The Xing family must have made some kind of transaction with the Qi family, and the person who made this transaction will not be his grandfather. Qi Yun knows his grandfather's temper too well. Once he is sure that this person is useless, he will never use any more snacks, so... Could it be that? Is it your own mother? Qi Yun was a little chaotic. His car accident was not an accident. Someone in the Qi family wanted to harm him. Although his mother had lost hope for him, she was his son after all. She wouldn't watch Qi Yun die, but it was absolutely impossible for her to take care of herself. The old housekeeper was hers. He took a breath, but didn't pay any attention. His mother also wanted to fulfill her good reputation in the outside world. Even if her eldest son was disabled, she had to pretend to maintain the image of a loving mother. Qi Yun sneered, this is his relatives, who are blood relatives who are doing the cruelest things in this world. Thinking of the woman who has been taking care of him these days, her name is Wan Wan, a very nice name. She was quite tall, and Qi Yun felt that she should not be much shorter than her previous self. She's quite thin, and when she was supporting her, Qi Yun would inevitably touch her chest, quite flat. A tall and thin woman named Wan Wan. Qi Yun was once again frightened by his own thoughts. What did he want to do, and how did this woman have anything to do with him? Qi Yun closed his eyes heavily. There was still the sweetness of beef soup in his mouth, and the rice was delicious. Xing Zongwan took a shower and changed his clothes, feeling that he was really exhausted physically and mentally. Tossed the dirty clothes into the laundry basket and went downstairs to the kitchen to eat some leftover beef soup. Seeing that it was too late to take a nap, Xing Zongwan decided to go out for a wave. He went upstairs to change his clothes, took the car key and went out the door. The old butler stood at the door with a pair of cloudy but sharp eyes staring at him. Xing Zongwan whistled at her, a happy mood is good for the body. Be healthy, don't keep your face sullen. Qi Yun should have fallen asleep, so I won't break the agreement between us when I go out. The old butler snorted coldly and turned to go upstairs. Xing Zongwan didn't want to say anything to her. He went out and got into his car. The car started. Xing Zongwan opened the car window and looked at the window on the third floor. The weather was fine today, the window was open, and the white curtains followed. The wind swayed. Xing Zongwan thought it was funny. Xing Zongwan, ah Xing Zongwan, when did you become such a mother-in-law? Step on the accelerator, and you have to get up today. Xing Zhong went to the mall late, shaking the thick envelope in his hand. No need to use it for nothing, it must be spent today. An hour later, with a full shopping bag in hand, Xing Zongwan threw a wink at the counter lady inside when she came out of the counter. Her legs were almost soft. Xing Zongwan shook his mobile phone, wandering around and wondering how many more women's contact information he had. He has been a vegetarian for a long time since he returned to China. I wonder if he should make an appointment tonight. The man who was paralyzed on the bed suddenly flashed in his mind. Xing Zongwan thought that it would have been so long without Qi Yun, and there should be no problem if he didn't go back for a night. Tossing shopping bags and humming songs all the way, I don't know how many men and women around him are secretly looking at him. Xing Zongwan has long been used to it, he knows how flattering his face is. Xing Zongwan booked a hotel, and found a woman in the address book who felt pretty good to make an appointment to meet. Xing Zongwan took a shower, wrapped his lower body in a towel, and opened a bottle of red wine. The water droplets slowly slid across the sturdy chest along the slender, snow-white neck, flowed through the beautifully shaped abdominal muscles, and finally slipped into the looming shadow of the bath towel. The doorbell rang. Xing Zongwan stretched out his red tongue and licked the red wine hanging on his lips, and started. It's just, everything is ready, the mood is strong. Xing Zongwan is about to carry the gun and enter, a thunder flashes by the floor-to-ceiling window, the rain hits the glass heavily, Xing Zongwan violently pushes away the woman under him. Qi Yun's room, are the windows closed? Xing Zongwan got up and put on his clothes, and the woman under him was pestering him dissatisfiedly. Xing Zongwan smiled at her, but was a little bored, took out a box from the shopping bag on one side and threw it over. When the woman opened it, she was full of surprises and wonders. This watch was worth her salary for several years. Xing Zongwan walked out of the room with a shopping bag, but did not forget to turn around and say, I have already paid the room fee. We will make an appointment next time, bye. The woman looked at Xing Zongwan flatteringly, she looked good and could see where to find such a good one-night stand partner. Xing Zongwan closed the door, the smile on his face disappeared, and he stepped into the elevator quickly. The window was very close to Qi Yun's bed. I wonder if the old woman would close the window. Xing Zongwan looked at himself in the elevator mirror, his gloomy eyes filled with desire and dissatisfaction, and the scratches on his face had not faded. He scolded in a low voice, Qi Yun, Lao Tzu is about to become a monk for you. Xing Zongwan drove the car back to Qi Villa in the suburbs. He couldn't see clearly in the rain. Xing Zongwan opened the door and got out of the car. The short distance from the car to the door was drenched in the rain. Xing Zongwan quickly went up to the third floor. As soon as the door was opened, a gust of wind with rain blew hidden. Xing Zongwan couldn't help yawning. The white curtains were already soaked and soaked. Hanging down. Xing Zongwan held back the swear words that came to his mouth, walked over to close the window, touched the rain on his face, and then had time to observe Qi Yun on the bed. The person on the bed closed his eyes, and the quilt was soaked through. Xing Zongwan was inexplicably agitated. You're not dumb, so you wouldn't call someone to close the window for you. There was only his own voice in the room, and the person on the bed seemed unresponsive as if he had fallen asleep. Xing Zongwan held his breath and walked back and forth in the room. What a mess! Xing Zongwan, you are really provoking someone. Qi Yun's eyes moved slightly, his eyelashes twitched. Xing Zongwan took a deep breath, and he was so angry with a disabled person. Turn on the air conditioner and pull off the quilt on Qi Yun's body. Fortunately, the clothes inside are not wet, but... Xing Zongwan glanced at Qi Yun's trousers, and the fire came up again. Master Qi, you can ask someone to get you a urinal, you. I'll go. Qi Yun's eyes trembled even more, but he didn't open his eyes and didn't speak. Xing Zhong has served late, yes, I am afraid of you, Third Master Qi, Ancestor Qi. Xing Zongwan resignedly went to the bathroom and took a wash basin towel to wipe Qi Yun's body and change his clothes, went to the cabinet to get a clean quilt, and even gave him medicine. More than an hour has passed since he finished this. Xing Zongwan panted, you don't have to eat, right? I'll go out for a while, and you'll be like this. You. I'll get you something to eat. Xing Zongwan ran downstairs. Qi Yun on the bed opened his eyes, his body was very refreshed, and the air conditioner turned on at a moderate temperature. There was still the smell of Xing Zongwan's body in the air, the very refreshing scent of pine wood. Chi Yun blinked, and the restless heart that had been resting all afternoon finally calmed down. After Xing Zongwan left, Chi Yun fell into a dizzy sleep, and when he woke up, it was still unusually quiet around him. Chi Yun's stomach was a little swollen and he wanted to go to the toilet. With difficulty, he lowered his hand to take the urinal beside the bed, but his weak body couldn't obey him. There were constant footsteps at the door of the room, someone was always outside. Chi Yun gritted his back molars and wanted to call someone. She seemed to have said that it took a lot of effort to change the sheets and quilts, thinking about how tiring that person would be to fall asleep sitting next to her. Chi Yun opened his mouth, and the voice of the newly arrived servant suddenly came from the door. "Hey, how long do you think the one inside looks like a dead man will live? It's been so long, do we want to go in and see?" "Forget it, the housekeeper didn't tell us not to go in and look for trouble. The person inside can't take care of himself, how dirty it must be. Are you willing to go in and urinate?" A burst of laughter came. "You said that Miss Xing was so beautiful, why did she come to serve such a useless person? Hey, I heard that the two of them still have a marriage contract." "Oh, it's a pity. I heard that the is paralyzed. I guess he can't stand up. It's a pity that he is not a widow after marrying." "Hey, don't say a few words, be careful that the people inside hear it." "What's the matter? What about the Qi family? Nowadays, who doesn't know that the most favored person in the Qi family is the fourth master of Qi, who is a fart? It's a pity Miss Xing. I have to live with such a useless person for the rest of my life." Chi Yun held the sheets tightly with both hands, closed his eyes, and his shoulders were shaking repressedly. A damp heat slowly spread from and a familiar stench filled the entire room. In the evening, the old housekeeper came to feed him, but Chi Yun didn't eat, and the old housekeeper walked out the door without a word. Chi Yun's face was facing out the window, she hadn't come back yet. It was raining, the wind was strong and the cold rain hit Chi Yun's face. Chi Yun opened his eyes indifferently, the sound of hurried footsteps outside the door closing the door and windows was sparse, but in the end no one opened his room door. Chi Yun's face was facing the direction of the door, and he tried his best to support his neck, but the familiar voice still did not appear. "Is she gone too?" The servant's words echoed in Chi Yun's mind. "It's a pity that Miss Xing is so beautiful, but she has to take care of a crippled person." Crap! Chi Yun's mouth curved into an awkward arc, and the strong wind washed away the stench in the room, but it couldn't hide the fact that Chi Yun was a cripple. Chi Yun stretched out his hand and thumped his leg heavily, closing his eyes in despair. "It's okay to leave, but don't come back." Xing Zongwan searched the kitchen for a long time, boiled a little porridge with green vegetables and minced meat, and saw some pickled side dishes in the kitchen, so he took some and heated them up. In fact, judging from his appearance, it is impossible to tell that he can cook, thanks to his mother. Xing Zongwan's mother was bedridden for many years, and Xing Zongwan learned to go to the kitchen to cook for his mother at a young age. After his mother left, Xing Zongwan seldom entered the kitchen. Unexpectedly, it was because of Chi Yun that he entered the kitchen again. Xing Zongwan looked at the hot porridge on the stove and shook it gently with a wooden spoon. "Originally a good night, I could roll the sheets with my favorite woman, but now I am standing in the kitchen and making porridge." Xing Zongwan was annoyed and almost threw the spoon in his hand into the pot. Before going abroad, his mother took Xing Zongwan to Qi house, carrying the snacks she made by herself. His mother is a kind-hearted person who wants to meet Mrs. Qi before leaving. But where is the Qi family so good, let alone seeing Qi Zongchen's wife? He and his mother were stopped at the gate of Qi house. The guards of Qi house looked at them like two dirty mice, and dared to come to see the old lady without looking at their identity. His mother coughed again because of the cold wind. Xing Zongwan pulled her sleeves to persuade her to go home, and his mother refused to wait any longer. Xing Zhongwan had to hold his hand and shivered by the wind. Until a familiar boy came out from the side door of Qi house. At the age of 15 or 16, he was born like a fairy, not like a mortal, and walked up to them coldly. Grandma is not feeling well and it is inconvenient to come out. Madam, I can communicate for you if I have something. He smiled apologetically and handed the snack to the boy. Be careful, I made it myself. The boy hesitated for a moment, then took it over. Thank you, ma'am. Little Xing Zhongwan's nose was red from the cold. Looking at the beautiful elder sister in front of her, she seemed to have grown taller and more beautiful. Xing Zhongwan looked at the young man with a small mouth, and the young man turned his head in displeasure. What do you think I am doing? Xing Zhongwan sniffed. Sister, you look so good looking, I've grown up, will you marry me? His mother was startled and hurriedly apologized, dragged Xing Zhongwan and left. Xing Zhongwan turned back reluctantly, and saw that the teenager threw the snacks made by his mother into the trash can at the door. A burning smell hit Xing Zhongwan's forehead. Ouch, I'll go. Xing Zhongwan quickly turned off the fire, looking at the burnt porridge, he couldn't help looking up at the sky. Back then, I was really fascinated by beauty. What a beautiful fairy sister is a cold and ruthless stinky man. Xing Zhongwan went upstairs with the porridge and sat next to Qi Yun. I just accidentally burnt a little bit, but I put the top of it out and it doesn't taste so great. He helped Qi Yun to sit up and started feeding him. This time Qi Yun cooperated very well, and the bowl of porridge was finished in a short time. Xing Zhongwan looked at his watch, it was getting late. He was about to go back to the room to get the quilt and hit the floor. As soon as he left the chair, Qi Yun suddenly asked, "Where are you going?" Xing Zhongwan maintained his posture of getting up and didn't move. What a hell, he took the initiative to talk to me today. I called, and they won't come in either. After a pause, Qi Yun turned his face slightly. I don't want people to see my body. Xing Zhongwan thought about it for a long time before he remembered it. This was answering his previous question. Xing Zhongwan said unexpectedly, "Then why can't I see your body?" Qi Yun's neck was red, and then his ears were red, because his Adam's apple, which was so thin and conspicuous, moved uneasily from swallowing saliva. After a while of silence, Xing Zhongwan felt that the question he asked was somewhat inexplicable. He turned around and was about to go out to get the quilt, but suddenly the corner of his clothes was caught. Xing Zhongwan turned around suspiciously. "Qi Yun, you have more to finish." The person on the bed lowered his head, and the clothes on his body were wide enough to clearly see the prominent spine below the back of the neck. "Girls, don't go out at night, it's not safe." Xing Zhongwan was stunned. "Girl? Who? Which? Where are the girls?" Looking back at Qi Yun's neck, which was about to be cooked, he finally understood a sentence that he would have to pay it back sooner or later. "Back then, it was my fault that I recognized you as a girl, but who made you look too beautiful? 15 or 16 years old is the age of hermaphrodite. But with my voice and figure, why do you think of me as a woman?" Xing Zhongwan is depressed.